Good day, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our CTC webinar on grading. Colin, if you can confirm if you can hear me well.
Yeah, Ramil, you sound great.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everyone again. My name is Ramil Laxmano, and I'm one of the SolidCAD's account manager for the Infrastructure GIS team. Joining me today is my colleague, Colin Cadet, one of our many techs with SolidCAD. So just to go through our agenda, I'd just like to go through as to who is SolidCAD, for those that are new to us, who is CTC, grading methods, overview and live demo of AutoGrader and Label Genie, and a Q&A session that'll be at the end. So please go ahead and type in your questions. We'll address them at the end. Now, before we get started, I just want to let you know about our next session. It's next Wednesday, December 9th. And it's a CTC Corridors webinar. And the aim is to reveal best practices using Civil 3D and CTC tools to merge and split corridors and streamline target mapping. Now, we're also continuing our online classes. During this time with COVID, we found that our online instructor-based training has been very engaging with respect to students and teacher interaction. It's actually aided all participants to follow the material and any questions at hand from one student, while others witness the solution altogether. It's been proven to be very good learning atmosphere. So please reach out to your sales rep for details and to reserve a spot, or you can just initially just go to our solidcad.ca website for other events, courses, and general info. So who is SolidCAD? Well, we've been your Autodesk reseller well over 25 years and kept the platinum partner status with SolidCAD. With Autodesk, I mean, we specialize in technologies that help support clients in industries such as architecture, engineering, construction, civil infrastructure, and manufacturing. With our services in consultation and training and workflow assessment, SolidCAD has delivered solutions to our clients to help maximize their ROI for their technological investments. And we're located right across Canada with 11 civil specialists actually growing. So located coast to coast to assist you in various time zones. And also locations of training facilities and offices spanning the nation. So CTC, well, they've been, since 2010, CTC has developed add-ins for Revit and Civil 3D, and they've established membership with Autodesk as part of the developer network. They're leading the space in developing BIM technologies and software services. And as of 2019, CTC Express tools are currently being used by more than 64,000 users worldwide, and more than 75% of the top firms in the United States alone. We've incorporated CTC tools as part of our product line only because SolidCAD wanted to be partnered with the industry leaders in productivity tools. So with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Colin, for our demo on CTC's grading tool. Colin?
All right, thanks a lot, Ramil. Can you see my screen there? We should have an agenda. Awesome. So this is a little bit more of a granular agenda of what we're going to be looking at for the CTC tools, as well as maybe some popular practices that we're going to look at today for grading. So today's grading, it's a small group today that that are on the webinar. So please be active with the questions, guys. If you have anything, I'm going to stop halfway through as well. And then we can go through questions there as well before we kind of jump into some of the CTC stuff. But today we're going to talk about grading, and it's a lot of, grading tends to be a fairly personal practice. So I'm not here to tell you guys that you're doing anything wrong or that our way is the best way or anything. I'm here to try and show some popular practices and kind of hopefully challenge your current workflows to see if we can implement a little bit more efficiency or some new grading methods in that. So the first thing we're going to start with is I want to talk about kind of the balance between precision and efficiency. So what we're looking at in this top portion right here, we've got a feature line, 21 meters. Now, if you've used feature lines before, you should be familiar with these little blue circles. Those are elevation points along the feature line. And now we can insert those one by one or at intervals. And what we're running into here is we have a lot of them, probably close to 60 between this, across this 21 meters. And depending on your design, it might be the exact level of accuracy that you need and the exact level of control over elevations that you need, or it might be way too much. So what we're talking about here, one of the useful practices we can do is to weed the vertices out of these feature lines. And now when we're weeding vertices, we have 3 criteria that we kind of set to decide how many of those vertices that we're weeding out. So the angle that it's going to turn, the grade that it's going to change, and then the length that it's going to do those in. And based on all of that, we can start weeding out kind of vertices that we've deemed unnecessary. That's going to keep our drawing a lot cleaner, because what are we doing with feature lines? Are we copying and offsetting them, which is then duplicating every single one of those vertices? Are we adding them to surfaces, which is then going to try and triangulate to every single one of those vertices? We're adding a lot of, we're building a lot of stuff off of feature lines, and we're adding a lot of data in the drawings using these feature lines. So we want to make sure that we don't have too much precision in these drawings to keep them clean and to keep them moving faster. Once we're in surfaces, we can also tidy up surfaces too. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the simplify surfaces. With the simplify surfaces, we have the option of eliminating edges or eliminating surface points. And we can do that based on the entire surface. We can do that based on different areas and things like that. But again, the idea is to keep our drawings clean so that they move quickly for us, so that when we're at 12 o'clock at night and we're trying to get a submission out, our drawings are actually working with us instead of against us. One last thing on this slide that I don't tend to touch on in this presentation very much is new as of 2018, I believe. Feature lines, we were able to assign elevations from a surface. We can then give it intermediate grade breaks or grade break points. And then we can also keep it relative to a surface. Relative to a surface, meaning we could literally just assume a depth of maybe a gas line, knowing that that's a foot or two underneath your existing grade. So we could draw it out in plan view using a feature line, and then we can actually give it elevations that keep it that foot or two below the surface. For those of you who haven't used intermediate grade breaks before, if you click that and apply it to a surface or apply elevations from a surface at any point that it crosses a triangulation in that surface, the feature line, it's going to add a grade break point there. So next, I want to talk a little bit about organization. Again, with the end goal of keeping your drawings working for you as opposed to against you, we want to be separating out our data so that it's keeping our drawings small and we're able to manipulate designs and things like that a lot more efficiently. More particularly when we're talking about grading, we want to keep that in its own drawing. There's a lot of stuff that goes into grading with feature lines and surfaces and volume surfaces and grading tools. A lot of that takes a lot of computing power with Civil 3D. So we want to make sure that we don't have other things like existing ground surfaces bogging us down, or pipe networks or corridors and things like that. So we can use data shortcuts to keep all that data separate, but bring it in when we need it. So for example, this existing site can be in its own drawing, and then we can data reference it in, knowing that that arrow down at the bottom corner, that little icon, means that it's a data referenced object. Now, looking at that existing site, I find a lot of people don't add the data afterwards. And this is another part of that organization, trying to keep as much information with the objects that you're creating all the way through the project. And we can do that through naming and descriptions. In this case, we're talking about that existing site surface. Well, if we're talking about an existing site of a subdivision that's under development, that existing site is really only a snapshot in time. And as trucks are coming in and out and there's a lot of moving of dirt, that's going to be very inaccurate very quickly. So you want to have that data associated with the existing site surface so that you know when it was created. And then in the description, we could say who surveyed it, how it was surveyed, and things like that. So you can determine the validity and the accuracy of the information in that surface. Really important stuff, and things like that description really aren't utilized, I find, as much as they could be in Civil 3D. Same thing goes for feature lines. There's styles and there's names. Feature lines aren't just created arbitrarily. We have them in there for a reason, whether it's a gas main, whether it's a back of curb or something like that. We want to tell Civil 3D and other users what those things are representing, because we want people to be able to jump into our drawing and see exactly what's going on because things are named properly, organized nicely, and everything else. Kind of a nice segue into the next portion of this is talking about organization of feature lines and offering a little bit more control over feature lines if they're sitting in a site. For that, I'm going to flip to Civil 3D. This isn't death by PowerPoint. We're going to spend a lot of time in Civil 3D. So what we're looking at here, we've got 3 feature lines, and we've also got them in a 3D model view here, just so for visualization. Now, if I go and look at these in the properties, you can see they've all got a style, and they're all on splits, the split site right there. Now, with feature lines, usually we're adding them to a surface. And if anyone's worked with a surface and tried to do this before, surfaces don't like having 2 different elevations at the exact same XY point. So with that being said, Civil 3D and Autodesk have put in some certain rules to deal with elevations of feature lines when they cross. So if I were to take this lightest feature line and cross that first line, you can see that the middle blue line there is taking the elevation of the lighter blue at that intersection point. Now I could do the same, dragging it across the navy blue as well. They're both taking the elevation of that lightest blue line when they intersect together. And that's by design with Civil 3D. Now, what happens if I move this middle blue line? Now it dictates the intersection point. So Civil 3D has a rule in place that says the last feature line edited is going to dictate those elevations. Now, I'm going to undo a couple of these real quick and add some styles to these. So I've got a couple different styles, very generically. 1, 2, and 3. And there we go. Now if I take the red one and I bring it across both, again, still dictating those intersection points. The key difference here is if I take the blue feature line now and I move it, it doesn't dictate that intersection point. This is a level of control that we have when feature lines, and only when feature lines, are contained within a site. So if I move over to my Prospector tab and take a look, under Sites, I have the split site, and I've got those 3 feature lines represented by the 3 styles I just assigned. This is called split point resolution. And if I right click on the feature lines in the site and go to Properties, I've got essentially a feature line hierarchy here. And I find a lot of people don't use this to their advantage, and it offers you a whole new level of control of being able to dictate what happens when two feature lines cross. So this is a fairly abstract idea here, but if I jump back to the PowerPoint, maybe a more tangible example here is looking at the bottom right, where we're looking at lot grading. And we've got an existing tie-in in the back, we've got road grades in the front, and then we've got perpendicular lot lines that connect between the both of them. Well, that perpendicular lot line, when it comes in contact with the road grades, we don't want the lot line dictating the grades right there. We want the right-of-way dictating those grades. So we can use different styles, feature line styles, to achieve that. Saying that probably existing ground tie-in is the most important feature line style that we're going to have. Then right-of-way, then maybe back of lot swales or something like that. We can have that in there as well. And then we can have these lot lines so that the lot lines really obey everything else until we want to add our own additional information inside there. Once we've kind of gotten some rough grades there, I think this is just a slide to dictate, with a lot of Civil 3D objects, the best stuff and the most useful stuff for manipulating those objects is usually found in properties or something like that. In this case, I find feature lines, the best stuff is kind of sitting in the ribbon, editing the geometry and editing the elevations. And in fact, one of my favorite tools is using this quick edit feature line elevations tool. This allows you kind of a visual heads up display on the fly to be able to look at elevations, look at slopes, and adjust them one by one as you're kind of scanning and skimming through your site. I like using this one a lot if you haven't used it before. Some of the new tools, new as of 2021, they've added a couple new ones for feature lines as well. So we've got insert points at crossing locations, set grade and slope across feature lines, so multiple. And we can also set quarter baseline elevations by reference. In the interest of time, maybe let's just kind of take the first one here. And we'll take a look at a use factor that we could use that for. Bumping into Civil 3D here, we've got kind of a subdivision lot here. And if I zoom in, it's taking advantage of the feature line hierarchy. So we've got 3 different styles. And if I select them all, they're all on the same site right here. Subdivision site. Now, it appears that I didn't set this up properly, so I'll have to delete some elevation points to show this off. There we go. So what I needed to preface that with is these perpendicular lot lines, they're being controlled by this red right-of-way line. But if I look at this red right-of-way line, I really don't have much control around this bulb. So we can gain a little bit more control using one of those new Civil 3D tools. We can insert points at crossing locations. When you select that, you have the option of a elevation point or PI. It's going to choose PI. In this case, I just click enter, and it adds one at every intersection point right here. And it can be fairly handy as we're grading things out to have that control, especially if we're using the feature line hierarchy. We want to make sure that the one that's dictating has control itself at those intersection points. If I flip back to my PowerPoint, that is some of kind of the preface stuff before I get into any grading methods. Ramil, if I get you to check out the questions, are there any at this point?
Yep, a question did come in. The question is, will the surface description go with the surface in an XML export?
Ooh. Will the surface description go with the surface in an XML export? Who
Yes.
is the name that asked that?
That's Caleb.
Okay. Caleb, I haven't tested that, I'll be honest. So what I'll do is Ramil and I will keep a tally of that, and I'll reach out to you afterwards with that answer. just to make sure that I'm not misleading you, if that's all right. Is there anything else in there, Ramil?
Nope, that's it so far, so we can continue. And if anybody else would like to ask a question, please do type them in. We'll answer them as they come.
Okay, great
Yeah.
question, Caleb. Thanks. The next thing we're going to talk about here is much more of a method. And we'll get into Civil 3D and try this out on the fly as well. What we're looking at here are interim surfaces and temporary sites. And where you might find this useful is two options here: complex parking lots, which is what we're going to look at, but first maybe slope bottom ponds. If we're using grading tools, we don't really have the option to grade at a sloping 1%. It's not a Civil 3D functionality, not in one step at least. So what we can do is create a temporary site to contain a couple feature lines and a grading group that we can then create essentially a plane that slopes at 1%. And then we can grade to that plane or that surface in our other site and grading group to create the bottom of this pond. And as you can see from this profile here, you can kind of get that grade to this plane that slopes at a 1%. As I switch into Civil 3D here, we're going to take a look at parking lots, more particularly this parking lot. We'll take a look at how to do that interim surface and how it can definitely speed up our design. And then we'll take a look at some of the CTC tools, so AutoGrader, and how AutoGrader can even more kind of speed up this process and avoid some of the headaches of iterations that we go through. So I'll flip over to Civil 3D, and what we're looking at now is that parking lot just in blue. And what we're going to do is create that temporary surface in here. So to create a temporary surface, I want a feature line, and I'm just going to create that feature line natively through Civil 3D. Now that I don't want it interacting with everything else, so I'm going to create a new site, and it's going to be temp parking lot grading. There we go. And that's going to contain everything there. Now we'll give it a name because we want to stay organized. So this is parking lot rough grades centerline. We can give it a style, but we can't give it elevations because we haven't even created it yet. There's nothing to give it elevations. So we're going to start out here, and I'll just grab something on existing here. I want elevations that reflect obviously the existing conditions. Up in my command line, it's suggesting. Love it. Let's do it. Then we can come up here at a slope. What's that slope? Well, we get to dictate that as we're creating our feature line. I'll come up at a 4:1. We'll give ourselves a little bit of elevation here. We could then jump in and look at this first island, and maybe that's a low point in our design. So I can jump in, grab the grade from the command line, and come down at a -2. Now the last of this grading center line, I want to make sure that I'm going to, as I grade left and right, I want to make sure that I'm encompassing everything on these blue proposed design feature lines. So I'm going to come up far past this outer corner here because I want everything to slope outwards towards exits of the parking lot. So I'll click up there, and I'm going to go up at a 1% grade. And that's it. That is my center line for the rough grades. The next step would be to use grading groups. So I can go up here and grading creation tools. Now in this toolbar, we'll have to set a grading group. Now those grading groups always sit inside of a site. You don't have an option here. And this temporary parking lot grading doesn't have a grading group yet, so it's going to force us to create one. We'll call this parking lot rough grades again. We could give it a description. We could also give it automatic surface creation. Now I'm going to stall off on this. We're not going to do this quite yet. You're going to find that as it has this automatic surface creation, it's going to automatically rebuild that surface every single time that you adjust the center line, so that feature line, or anytime you add or adjust grading components. It can get very slow and tedious, and it's additional stuff to process. So we're just going to create the grading for right now. We can come back afterwards and create that surface. So I'll click OK. Now we've got a grading group. I want to grade to distance. Looks great. Let's create grading. I'll select that baseline, which is a feature line here. Pick my grading side. The entire length, yes. And what's my distance? I want to make sure that I'm encompassing that. So 60 definitely grabs everything. I'm going to do it at a grade of -1. So it slopes towards that exit. I can do this again for the top side, pick my grading side, entire length, and 60. Oh, missed a click there. There you go. Pick the grading side, yes to the entire length, 60 is the distance, and I want a grade of -1. There we go. And now if we look at that, these grading components completely overlap with every piece of the blue proposed gutter lines. Now from there, I can grab any piece of one of those grading. I can go in my contextual tab to the grading group properties. And now I've got that option to turn the surface back on, or to create a surface now. It was never on. It's going to give us some options here. Again, we can add a description and things like that. For right now, this looks good. We'll click OK. And now we've got a grading surface. I have no need for this toolbar anymore because I've got the surface that I was looking for. The next step would be to apply those surface elevations to each one of these feature lines. And now remember I said the best stuff is in the command line with feature lines. Well, I have elevations from surface. And now I could do this in the elevation editor, but elevations from surface has one extra option that I want. So I'm going to pick this parking lot rough grades and we'll click OK. Now I can select one object, or if we look in the command line, because we always want to keep one eye on the command line. You never know what kind of options there are in there, or additional options. I can click multiple. And in this case, I can click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I can add elevations to all 6 at the same time. Now, if I were to grade this one, look at it in elevation editor, we're good to go. It's got elevations on it now. Now that we have the elevations for each of these feature lines, that's the rough grade elevations. Now we just need to create the actual curves. And that portion is a little less exciting. It's just kind of repetitive. So I'll do it for a couple of them here. Selecting, we want stepped offsets. And we can specify the distance, so 0.5. We want the side. And the best way to do this, I'll pick that grade of 2% up, and it does the lip of curb. The fastest way to do these offsets is to do all of the same type at once. Pick the side, enter. Pick the feature line, pick the side, and accept the defaults here. So you get a couple of those all at once. Then we could come back, stepped offset. We'll do that top of curve now. What's my offset distance? 0.05, like 5 centimeters. Side to offset, well, I want inside. And what's my grade? Well, I don't really want a grade. I just want a difference. And I want to come up at, oops, not 0.5, 0.15, 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And if we zoom in, it added it in there. So that's the top of curve. Again, do all of the top of curves at the same time because that's kind of the faster way to do it. And you can see how this gets pretty boring and repetitive. Then the last thing we do is jump in here, stepped offset. I want 6 inches for the back of my curb. Depending on where you are, that may change. Then we're going to do an elevation difference of 0. There we go. And now we've got curbs in here. So I'd have to go through and add that to every single one. But you get the idea. Then I can select all of those feature lines and add them to my proposed surface. The problem with that is, well, what if this doesn't drain properly out to this direction or out to this direction? Now I need to go back and edit maybe my rough grade surface so that it drains a little bit steeper or whatever the case. I have another iteration of this grading that I have to do. Well, now that becomes a pain because I need to come in here, edit the gutter line, and then reflect that through stepped offsets. But I can't do that all in one go. So I'm deleting all of my feature lines here that represent top, back, and lip of curb. And then I have to go back in and adjust the grades here and then continue those offsets. That's sort of the downfall of some of this site development grading, is when it comes into updating each of these options. And if I zoom over, we're going to take a look at how AutoGrader can kind of fix some of that. So I'm going to pan over back to the red version here. And what we're looking at is another version of this parking lot, and it still has a temporary surface. It's just done slightly differently with a grid spacing of feature lines. So I'm just going to turn those off. And now we're left with the same feature lines. They already have their elevation, so we don't need to go through that interim surface process. We just want to reflect the curves. So the lip, the back, and the top of curb. If I flip to the Sim Project Suite, I'll pop open AutoGrader, and we're going to take a look at this AutoGrader. It separates things out in grading families. Right now, I have 2 grading families for the site. Got building site grading limits and building site curb. And you can see it pops open a nice little preview. And what we're doing here, if I go and edit this, in this grading family, we're identifying parent feature lines. So these parent feature lines are the red curb gutter lines. And the way we've chosen to select all 6 of those is by filter. And if I hit this little ellipse, it offers me all of my filter options. So we grabbed it by layer. So I'll cancel out of that. Then we're creating the top of curb, the back of curb, and the lip of curb right here. We're associating them to those parent feature lines through anchor objects, methods of grading, to the right or to the left, and then the distances, elevations, and slopes, etc. Once we've done that, we can also format those child feature lines. So I can pop this open, and I can format them all at once using the family defaults. I want these to respect the layer, so we're going to put them on curb, and we can also put them on the site. Once this is all set up here, I'll close out of it, and this is ready to go. All I have to do is hit run. Notice it's already got this surface selected. So it's going to perform all of these offsets for us automatically, and it's going to add it all to a surface. Now it does take a couple seconds because there's nothing proprietary in these tools. All of this is just Civil 3D feature lines and surfaces. But now that I close out of this here, if I zoom in, we've got triangles for the surface, and we can see that we've got top of curb, back of curb, the gutter, which is the parent, and then the lip as well. So it really speeds that up, just even doing the offsets. Now, if we wanted to get even more creative here, what if this changed? What if I needed another island here. See? And I needed another island kind of dead in the middle here. Well, now I've got to offset this. What if we had a bump out here that we needed? So I'll grab this guy. I'll just drag this out a little bit. Now, that's still attached to the surface. So the surface is going to rebuild automatically for us. And we can change those settings or whatever the case. It's still going to update. But now our top, back, and lip of curb are out of place there. Well, with AutoGrader, it still remembers how those are supposed to associate together. So I just need to open this up and run it again. And because it's a layer filter, it's also going to find that additional island that we put in there too. So it offers a really flexible, fast way to go about going through iterations of your grading. It's going to update all of those offsets, and then the surface will rebuild on top of it. That does take a couple seconds. Again, we're adding all that information to a surface, and then we're updating all of that surface as well. And are there any other questions at this point, Ramil?
Nothing new has come in yet, Colin.
Okay, thank you. There we are. So I can close this out. Now it's updated everything here. And once I gain control here, there we go. We can see it's offset everything there nicely for us. And it's added a whole new island in here for us because it's recognized that new parent feature line through the layer filter that we set. So I'm going to pan back to the PowerPoint here for a minute. Let's look at one other option that we can do using different types of grading, I guess natively as well as using AutoGrader. Oh, come back. And what we're looking at here is more of a lot grading scenario. So we're going to jump back into that bulb in Civil 3D, and we're going to look at how we could do that natively potentially, and then how AutoGrader can really speed that up. So I'll jump back in here. There we go. And we're working with the feature line hierarchy. So I want to start adding break line or split points to this, or grade breaks to this. And if I look at the elevation editor right now for each one of these lot lines, both the start and end of that, so the front and the back of that, are being dictated by other feature lines. That's that split point resolution that's happening in the drawing. So we're going to take advantage of that. And we could control all of those with a setback or the front of house and things like that, and grade those lots just by doing a stepped offset of the bulb here. So I'll grab the stepped offset for the bulb here. I'll pick the distance, so maybe a 6 meter for a setback right now. Pick my offset side. And then I'm going to come up at a grade of 2%. And it's created this whole new one. Now, if I look at this, these lot lines, they're still getting dictated. So now I've got 3 grayed out triangles. I can't edit these elevations, these slopes, or anything, because they're being dictated by the more powerful, kind of in quotations, feature lines in that site. So what I'll do now with the native tools, I'll clean this up a little bit. I'm going to use the break feature line command here. So I'll break the feature line. Now, when you're doing the break feature line command, feature lines have chainage associated to them. And you need to start, come on. You need to start from lower chainage and go to higher chainage. Oh, somehow that one didn't work for me. It's okay. I don't need this first part because I just want walkout lots. Any of them that back onto the pond there. So I'll tidy this up. I just want to delete that PI that's in the middle of the lot. Nice. All right. Yeah, so this is the smaller change, and then it gets bigger as it comes around the bulb and heads towards the street there. So I have to select and then go higher change. Otherwise, you'll be left with a little piece in the middle that you were trying to delete. Excellent. Now that we have just the lots we want to control here, we can continue with stepped offsets. And it's just a little bit more of a process here, right? So grabbing that line, I want to pick my offset distance, maybe that's 10 meters. Pick my offset side out this way, and we'll go at a grade of 4%. Cool. Grab this one, stepped offset again, offset side. This case, let's make them walkouts. So it's a slope. Oh, and it actually assumed the wrong distance there. So it was assuming the last distance I used. So I'll grab this one, stepped offset. I want 6 meters towards the back of lot at a slope of -3 to get that walkout there. Then it would just be a case of adding any or all of these feature lines to the surface. Because if I take a look at any of these lot lines, it has 5 elevation points on it now. They're just not in control, or this lot line isn't in control of those. All of those are controlled across these red parent feature lines. That would be one of the native ways to do it. It's not the best, it's not the only, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but it's one of the popular practices for doing lot grading is parallel offsets into the lots. I'd like to pan down, maybe and just look at another chunk of this site, and we'll see how AutoGrader tackles this. So pop open AutoGrader. There's 2 different types of families right now that we can have with AutoGrader. There's the parallel families, and if I just go and add another one, there's parallel grading, which creates dynamic links between offset feature lines, or there's perpendicular. So you've got a parent feature line in blue, and all of the child feature lines are going to be, you're going to add grade breaks to them, and they're perpendicular. So I've already got one of those half started here. I just want to go and edit, and let's take a look at how it was created. So all I've done so far is added a filter to grab all of these red parent feature lines. How have I done that? The same way we did it last time. We did a layer filter. The only difference is we took advantage of wildcards in here. Now, we could also grade all of our existing, or we could create new ones. Now, it looks like the filter did not grab it this time. Let's see what layer these are on. It is on layer lot lines type 1. Perfect. So we'll go back into AutoGrader and go and edit this group so that it selects all of these. And now that gives me a little bit more to talk about here. Dash type 1. Maybe it wasn't dash. Okay. Sorry, guys. Let's just Control C. I'll grab that layer. Back into AutoGrader, and we'll try this one more time. Edit. So we want to edit that grading family, and I want to find all of those child feature lines. Perfect. So I put that in there. I found that layer, and now it's finding 99 feature lines here. Once we've added those in, we can adjust the formatting before we get into anything else. So we can adjust the formatting of what these are going to be created as. So I want the layer to be lot lines type 1. There we go, and we'll put it on that same site so it takes advantage of that feature line hierarchy. And then we'll add a couple of these in here just real quick. Let's go setback. And we'll go front of house. One more, let's go back of house. There we go. And as we create each one of these, you can see it's populating in the display down here. Now, what are some of these? Let's go 6 at a 2%, 10 at a 4%, and I'm just kind of making these up here right now. Yours are definitely going to vary a little bit from each of these, but just enough so we can see a little bit of variation here. Now, once we've created those grade breaks, I can save and close. I can see that grading family. I'm adding it to a surface. And now when I'm adding it to the surface, I have these kind of surface options here as well. How am I adding those break lines in here? So it offers supplemental factors and things like that. Once I've got it all set up, let's click run, and it's going to add those grade breaks across the entire site, and it's also going to add them to the surface. Now, there were 99 child feature lines that it's adding 3 grade breaks to a piece, so it does take a minute. But just like that, we can see that we've got all of these added in here. That's kind of half of the puzzle. I mean, yeah, that gets us a surface, but now the surface isn't labeled or anything like that. So the other half of this puzzle we can achieve with Label Genie. And we can blanket the site so that we're labeling it for a grading plan or something like that. And I'm coming up on time, so I'll go through this fairly quick. It looks like I've got 10 minutes left. Label Genie allows you literally hundreds of different labeling scenarios, depending on the type of label that you want to use. In this case, it looks like spot elevations are the way we want to do it. The type of anchor objects, the anchor points on those objects that you want, and things like that. With Label Genie, you can just label the current drawing. We can label drawings that aren't even open. We can label external references or just specific areas of the model space that are defined by different layouts and viewports. There's tons of flexibility in Label Genie, but the goal is to automate about 95% of all of your labeling across the site by running through this a couple times with different scenarios. In this case, I'd like to label each one of those lot lines at each one of the grade breaks. So surface spot elevations looks good. Feature lines, that's what those lot lines are. Now, which feature lines? Well, if I didn't know, within here, I can just click the little ellipse as well, I forgot to mention. And we could go and pick one of those lot lines. It's going to populate it for me here. Click OK. Now, what anchor points? Well, I'd like vertices. Then we can pick the types of vertices. So we've got a whole bunch of different options here. I'm going to leave them all except for midpoints. Surface as well. Again, hit that little ellipse. You get the filter options. In this case, we're not doing a layer. We'll do it by name because we want to be a little bit more specific. Now, the last of this, we want to go over to the Formatting tab. We have the option of adding AutoCAD fields in there. What we're really focused on, though, is down at the bottom here. We want the style. We want like a basic marker style in here. And I could apply rotations in here too. So I could put a 90-degree rotation on all of these. This is relative to the WCS. When I click Add Labels, Add Update Labels, it's going to run through. It's going to add 508 labels. I'll click Yes. Oops. And it's going to go through the process for me. And it'll give me a little summary at the end as well. In a release that's happening before the new year, we're going to have the option to orient these to the objects so that they work a little bit better for us for grading plans. Now at the end here, we've got a summary of everything that happened in the current drawing. We would also have summaries of other drawings in there as well if we had them. Click OK. I'll zoom in. And now that's not exactly what I wanted, but it is following on every single grade break. And if I drag this guy away, it is an actual surface spot elevation. Now, in the interest of time, I want to show you guys one more thing with Label Genie, and that would be to label the slopes in between. So we'll open up Label Genie this time. Now, if I had this all set up nicely the way I want it, I can also save this out to a template. Same thing goes with any of your auto grader grading families. You don't have to recreate the curve every time. You don't have to recreate those lots every time. We can save them out to a template, and then you could bring it into other projects and things like that as well. So you can share it amongst coworkers and things as well. So it almost becomes a chunk of your standards if you wanted to. In this case, I want a surface slope 2 points as our last scenario here to label each of the slopes in there. Feature lines, it's still picking the good ones in the filter right here. Perfect. Segments, I have the options for segments. So you see how your options change a little bit. Now I have the options of lines and curves. Still got that same surface selected. In the formatting tab, I just want to make sure that I'm choosing %, my correct style. So your styles from your standards fit into this flawlessly as well. Add update labels. It's going to add 409. And then it's going to add them all in, give me my summary. Awesome. Come in here and we can take a look. We've got each one of these. Now, the very last portion varies because we didn't dictate any of those grades. All of those are just tying into existing. But as you can see, it's labeling every single one, 2%, 4%, 2%. And you can run through this. It'll update labels if we were to change the grading in AutoGrader. You could come back, update the labels and the locations and things like that, and it'll do all of that for you. But we've just blanketed those labels across the entire site for us. That saved us 2-3 hours worth of work of positioning and adjusting labels and things like that. So I'm going to flip back to my PowerPoint. In fact, I might let Ramil take over here. So I'll stop sharing. And Ramil, do you have any questions from anyone to wrap up this webinar today?
So nothing new has come in. No. Please do type them in, folks, if you do have any questions. Definitely like to address that.
Yeah. Maybe a couple more things worth noting as people might be typing in questions. In the next couple weeks, we're releasing, or CTC is releasing a new update to AutoGrader and Label Genie and a number of different other tools within their suite. Label Genie is going to have even more scenarios that you can label in there. And AutoGrader, they're offering template grading as opposed to parallel or perpendicular grading. And that template is going to represent a building pad in any of your sites. So that building pad, you're going to be able to create kind of a standard building pad, and then you can copy that across in each one of the sites, or in each one of the lots rather. We'll have another webinar coming out featuring that tool as well, or that addition to the tools.
Yeah. So, folks, if there's no other questions you had in mind, I just want to remind you about next week's webinar for corridors. That's December 9th on Wednesday. Please reach out to your account manager or just log into solidcad.ca for more information, and also our courses that we have for December 14th, 17th for fundamentals, Civil 3D fundamentals, and transportation course for Civil 3D, January 13th and 15th. So with that, if there's no other further questions, we'd like to thank you for your time attending today's session. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you very much, Ramil, and thank you everyone else for attending. Have a great day.